one right here from the city of Dallas. We have David Gossam, who is the Director of Sustainable Development and Construction. And we have Teresa O'Donnell, the Chief Planning Officer for the city of Dallas. So let's give them a round of applause and we'll go get started.
Thank you, Kelly, and thanks again for pulling all this conference together for everybody. It's a great opportunity to learn from one another, and I've enjoyed what we've heard so far and taken stuff away. I have some questions for our fellow planners out there. So it was mentioned that we've got two separate departments now, right? We've got Sustainable Development and Construction, which used to also contain strategic planning. We decided to do away with some silos, and we have planning functions in housing, planning functions in economic development, planning functions in transportation. So really our city manager decided to try to consolidate that effort, leave Teresa to all the easy fun stuff, and give me the day-to-day stuff. So it's worked out pretty well so far, but she was very shrewd. I think she had that choice, I'm not sure. But in terms of where we are today, in terms of our development status, if you will, we don't look dissimilar to Houston or to Fort Worth. In 2005, things were booming along. We saw a decline down to 2007. Permit activity dropped maybe 15%. Valuation dropped 20-25%, so we still ended up laying off probably over half our building inspection staff and our planners, and decimated our historic preservation department. So we're still recovering from that, hiring folks back up. But keep in mind, we only lost about 15% of our number of permits, so it was a struggle there for a while, and working our way back. So valuations now are higher than they ever were before within the city, and everything seems to be good. Well, I thought everything was rolling along pretty good. Driving in from Dallas last afternoon, I'm driving along, I get this email, and email says, it's from the Public Information Officer. They need a comment. Wall Street Journal report is asking for a comment. San Antonio says they don't want to face the same dilemma Dallas did. Please comment. They don't want to happen to them what happened to Dallas. Where's John? He's not here. So I think the whole question circled around, I think San Antonio's on an ambitious annexation plan right now, looking to some of their cities so they don't get surrounded, if you will. And certainly that is the experience of Dallas right now, and kind of leads to some of the situations that we're currently under. Back in the late 1980s, our lovely sister city, Fort Worth, had this idea, or a developer had this idea for this industrial airport concept. So since we so love our sister city, we said, man, we got to go grab something real quick. So we made this, looked around, we looked to the west. Well, there was Grand Prairie and Irving shutting us off, plus that was already DFW, couldn't go there. Looked to the north, shut off by Farmers Branch and Carrollton and Plano, couldn't go there. So we had this little slender opening to the south down the 45 corridor, and you could almost see Wilmer, their little deer eyes, popping up. So Wilmer throws out one hand to Seagoville, throws out another hand to DeSoto, annexes this little 10-foot strip, and that's it. We're encircled. So we do have one out across the lake. If we develop a little ferry system, we can go to the other side of Lake Ray Hubbard. We have 5 miles of ETJ extending out that direction. Just haven't figured out a way to serve that just yet. So here we are. We're kind of maybe in a unique situation to most of the cities that are represented here today. We're looking to how we handle this type of situation. The slides that were shown, I think by Fort Worth particularly, showing the demographic change and things like that. Since from 2004 to 2011, our mayor has a task force on poverty. They pulled up this data where they looked at tax returns between those years. And somehow they figured out in 2014 dollars there was $23 billion that left the city. $19 billion moved into the city. So we're $3 to $4 billion short of income of where earned income from where we were 10 years ago. And it's really kind of what a lot of Teresa's going to talk about, that things have shifted a little bit, and unlike Houston, where I can say, I'm going to go annex Kingwood, that's going to solve my problems. We don't really have that luxury at the moment. So this is where we're at, and I think one of the things that Teresa's really been good trying to find out, though, is, okay, so we might be poor, but we've got this young population, we've got this extremely diverse population, so how can that work for us? And I think that's not a bad situation to be in, be young and diverse. There's certainly some advantage to be found there. So I'm going to throw it over to Teresa to run through some slides, but thank you all again for being here.
Oh, okay. David's timing me. So it's nice to be back in Houston again. I was actually in Houston in the early 90s working on the zoning project and made a lot of great... You guys are laughing. Really? You're laughing? Hey, as I reminded somebody here, the zoning initiative was adopted unanimously by the Houston Planning Commission and the City Council. Right, and then there was that awful referendum. But anyway, so it's nice to see Marlene and Margaret and a bunch of my old friends that I haven't seen in a long time. It's nice to be here. Okay, can we go ahead to the next presentation? No, do I have it here? Let's see, I'm in control. No, other way. There we go. Okay, so like David said, unlike Houston, San Antonio, Fort Worth, we're landlocked by all the other cities. And one of my new responsibilities at the City of Dallas is taking over comprehensive planning for all the various departments. So we used to have it in housing and in transportation and in economic development. And so we're pulling all that planning back into one central department, and yeah, it's going to be interesting. So one of the first, and as a lot of people have talked, it's great to be a Texas city right now, right? It's great to be a Texas city. Randall and I go up to a conference on the East Coast every year, and about half of the planning directors there are from legacy cities that are experiencing all this decline and disinvestment. And I got to tell you, it's great to be in the Southwest, especially in Texas. Not only in terms of raw population, but jobs. You know, the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is the fourth largest metro economy in the United States. Its metro economy is bigger than Belgium. So we love being there. But as David said, we really are starting to drill down and look at what's happening in our population. So even though it's great to be in north central Texas, you can see Dallas is not doing as well in terms of incomes. We really have two different cities like Fort Worth. We have the very, very wealthy in Dallas, and we have abject poverty in Dallas. And so we're working on a housing plan right now to kind of look at that and figure out how to address some of these trends. In order to do that, we needed to look at what's happening in our region because we're not a standalone economy. In between Dallas and Fort Worth, I think there's 145 little cities. Not that Arlington's little, Bridget. You know, you're numbered, what, 7 now? So that's cool. But we really have to look at what's happening in our region, and what, in a very growing region, we needed to ask ourselves the very tough question of what share of that growth are we now getting, and how can we compete for the segment of growth that we want. So you look at Dallas's, and we're holding steady, you know, in terms of the region's booming like crazy, and Dallas is holding very steady, but our share of growth continues to decline. So it's very important that we understand what that share is, especially in terms of wealth. We have a lot of asset poor, we have a lot of working poor in Dallas, and how can we help those people enter the middle class? That's going to be our big challenge for the next 10 years. How we help the working poor enter the middle class and become successful. The shrinking middle class in Dallas is following the national trend. Of course, we're seeing that in a lot of big cities, but it's very pronounced in Dallas. So we know that's going to be our big challenge. When you look at poverty, and we've done some, you know, time sequences of this map, but poverty used to be concentrated in the southern sector in Dallas, and now you see pockets of poverty all over Dallas. Now, one of the interesting things about Dallas is because we're in this metro area, we still have 500,000 people a day coming into work into the city. So they might be choosing to live in Frisco and Allen and still Plano and our outlying suburbs, but we're starting to ask ourselves, we're seeing two interesting trends. One is we've got a lot of reverse commuters now. We've got a lot of baby boomers and millennials that want to be in Dallas. They want to live in Dallas, but they're commuting outside. So that kind of light blue line is people that are living in Dallas and they're commuting out. But we still have 500,000 people. We're still a jobs magnet for the region. So how do we capitalize on that? How do we really understand those trends, and can we capture some of those people to live back in Dallas? And so that kind of has been the basis of our research that this plan we're working on, is how we capitalize on the distinct urban advantage of being in Dallas. And how do we attract some of those folks? That's been the center of a new Housing Plus plan, and Randall is right. If you're not engaged with health providers in your cities, you are missing out on a lot of money. The new American Affordable Care Act requires hospitals to be responsible for following their patient and patient outcomes. It's not just, you know, giving them a prescription and sending them out in the door anymore. They have to follow up with them. And so that has been a big foundation of this plan, is really revitalizing inner city neighborhoods, looking at health and safety, education, and mobility. Those are the three big challenges we really have in Dallas, in bringing middle-income people and back to the city. So we know we've done a lot of demographic studies. We know that Dallas, because of the Latino population, is a relatively young. That's great for workforce. That's great for employers. They want to see those kind of numbers. We need to make sure, though, that we've got a well-skilled, well-qualified workforce. So DISD has been a big part of this plan, too, because we know they're not doing the job that we need them to do, right? DISD still has a lot of challenges. But we know Dallas is a very exciting place for especially boomers and millennials. We know the millennials are, I think Austin is ahead of us on millennials, but we've got a huge kind of millennial population, and it's become very diverse. And millennials want to live in the central city. So we did a lot of mapping to find out what our urban advantages are. We've got a lot of active density in Dallas, that people want to be, they want to be outside, they want to be walking around, they want to be where there's retail services and kind of nightlife going on. We know Dallas is a very walkable city. These are areas that we've mapped just looking at subdivision patterns. We know there's short blocks. We know that they're near open space and greenway opportunities. We've got good access to parks and other kind of urban amenities in Dallas. And we've got good access to jobs. Randall's right. We went double down in 1983 with DART, the full penny, and now DART has the largest light rail system in the country. Yeah, that's a big wow, right? Dallas, right? Now, we've managed to not really capitalize on TOD yet, but I think DART has about 52 or 53 light rail stations. And because when we were doing this in the early 80s and everybody's kind of afraid of that, a lot of the suburbs really weren't looking to put light rail stations. Like University Park didn't want one, Highland Park didn't want one. So out of those 52 or 53 light rail stations, Dallas has 48. So that's, so we got a lot of great opportunity for light rail. We're even talking right now to DART. In fact, there's a meeting today to DART to put a second alignment downtown, because we're actually at capacity. On the existing lines, they can't get more trains into Dallas. And so they're looking at another line that'll probably be subway. It'll be our first subway. So that'll be really cool. And the other thing we found out in Dallas is we have a lot of high-income mobile people. A lot of people just choose to rent in Dallas. And so we thought, okay, so maybe we can capture those folks too. So we started our typical kind of demographic study that all planners do. And you know, when you do demographics, you do basically age and gender and household income. But then we thought, no, we need to really understand these people. So we did something that marketers and retailers have been doing a long time. We went out and got the psychographic data, right? So every time you swipe your card at Starbucks or Target, they capture information about you. And the retailers have been using this for 10 years, right? To figure out where to put a Wendy's or where to put a Starbucks or where to put, you know, a CVS. They knew that. So we said, well, why aren't we using that stuff? Why aren't we using that? We know people want to live in Dallas. We know we haven't segmented our market enough to attract those kind of people. So let's take a look at this this psychographic information and analyze the people that are here right now and who wants to be here to figure out how we can structure our new housing plan. And so we took all that information, and if you look at the kind of orange-brown line, versus the blue line. So we know those are our competitive advantages. We know there's about 67 or different psychographic segments, and we knew out of these top 10, the ones that you see with the red bars, those are the people who would rather live in Dallas than any place else in the metro region. That might not have a house there now. They haven't just found quite the right neighborhood, but those are the people who want to be in Dallas. So how can we structure this housing plan to really capture those folks? If you haven't looked at this information for your city, it's very fascinating. You ought to take a look at it. And so we knew, here's our top 10 groups. We wanted to understand who these people were and what they like and where would they want to live and what would the city have to do to attract them, right? So now we're starting to look at those. So these, the Barrios Urbanos, New West residents, La Casas, that's a big portion of Dallas households. They're young families, they've got kids, it's often multi-generational families, so you know all of our subdivision regulations are zoning regulations that don't provide for a second dwelling unit. We need to be looking at that kind of stuff. They're younger families, they're right now living in apartments, they really want to be in single-family homes even if they need to rent a single-family home. They own cars, but they frequently carpool, they love soccer. They drink a lot of those energy drinks, you know, they're spending a lot of their personal income on maintaining their personal lifestyle, right? And then you've got these metro renters and the young and the restless and the laptops and the latte groups. There again, 84,000 households in Dallas. You know, those are those kind of hip, slick, and cool people that are working for you that, you know, want to bring their dog to work and wear flip-flops all the time. You know, they're renters, they're environmentally conscious, they shop at Trader Joe's, they shop at Whole Foods, you know. So those are the people that are mobile, that you want them to, they're not going to buy a house on a 10,000 square foot lot with a swimming pool, right? They're not going to do it, but they would buy a cool condo in Uptown, right? And we know our subdivision regulations really aren't very friendly to townhomes and condos and skinny houses, because those are cool now. So we kind of know that. So then you have the suburbanites, the top tier, the ex-burbs people, a smaller trend, but still people who want to live. These are the people that live in Lake Highlands. You know, they listen to NPR and they shop online, and you know, they're me, right? They're racking up their frequent flyer miles. You know, we know there are neighborhood niches that these people will gravitate towards. These are the people that live around White Rock Lake, right, and ride their bikes. And then we've got kind of more traditional kind of family groups. They live in modest single family. These are the people that spend their weekend at Home Depot, right? They love their family. They spend a lot of money on home furnishings and keeping their their homes up. They have moderate education levels, usually low-paying jobs. These are the people that are one paycheck, they're one crisis away, right? They're one crisis away from maybe losing their homes. So what is it we need to do for these folks? Fort Worth, your neighborhood empowerment zones, great ideas. Do some tax abatements, some mortgage assistance, down payment money. Those are simple things that we could do to attract these folks. We've even mapped where these people are, and we know which area of town that we need to work on. So now we know, in East Dallas, that maybe with some down payment assistance, we can take huge areas of single-family rental and maybe turn those into home ownership. We know in down south in South Dallas near the UNT, we know there are a lot of aging baby boomers that are on fixed incomes. They own their home, but they're asset poor. So one major, the air conditioning goes out, they have a roof repaired, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. So maybe we have a minor emergency home repair. So really what we're starting to do is understand Dallas in a very different way and mapping out all our housing policies and programs in order to attract those groups. We've been working on this plan, and in the interest of full disclosure, we were in a lot of trouble with HUD, and so that was really why we started this plan. But it's worked out really, really well. HUD is very happy with us. We signed a VCA a couple of weeks ago, and because I know that San Antonio's in a little bit of trouble, and Houston is in a lot of trouble with HUD. They have been for a long time. So if you need to know how to get out of that, we can kind of help you. Yeah, and you guys just got out of jail just recently. Yeah, HUD jail. So we've been working on this for about 8 months, I'd say, but all of these policies and strategies, we've kind of started, we really have wrapped them around this new way of looking at our population. And that's really what I want to talk to you guys today, because I know you've heard the comp planning speech 100 times, but it's kind of a fun and interesting way to look at your city and to go a lot deeper than standard demographic analysis, and I would encourage you to do that if you have a chance. So with that, I think David and I are happy to take any questions. Yep. 21 minutes.
God, you did great.
Hi, I'm just interested in what kind of consultant you hired to do that kind of work. Was it a marketing group or?
Oh, there you are. We did a lot of it in-house, and we've been using Fraganesi and Associates to help us. John is, he's very interested in finding new ways to look at stuff, and he's a mapping genius. He can put just about anything on a map, which is, we found to be very, very helpful. But a lot of it we've done internally. Yes, sir.
I think that's a really interesting way to look at the city. How have the neighborhoods reacted to being classified in those particular ways? Do they tend to say, yeah, you've captured us pretty well? Or do you get some mismatch?
Well, I think anytime you go out to a neighborhood group, you have those people who are very unhappy with how their neighborhood is, but by God, they do not want you to change anything, right? So they're always going to be there. But what we've done with this information is we've done some additional market research. So we'll take out this kind of dog and pony show to the neighborhoods, and then we do a lot of that instant key poll, and we ask them, what kind of services would you like to see? What kind of services do you think would help in your neighborhood? Everything from sidewalk repair to down payment assistance to, and so we've been asking, and then we've been getting really good response. In fact, we just finished a round of neighborhood meetings last Saturday, and they went very, very well. We're going to continue to kind of do that after the holidays to get some more feedback. But some people, like Houston and Fort Worth and San Antonio, I'm sure all the big cities, they're seeing major demographic changes. Some people just don't want to see new people in their neighborhood, no matter who those new people are. And some people embrace it. We've got an area of town called Lake Highlands that has been experiencing a lot of turnover, a lot of new families coming in now. And I don't know, Mike, about 5 or 6 years ago, you hear a lot of crabbing about it, but right now they seem to have embraced that change. Yeah, they're even going to get a Sprouts grocery store, which, you know, when we started, they wanted a Tom Thumb, you know, but now they want Sprouts. So I think people are starting to embrace that change. But we're not quite to Trader Joe's. Yeah, it's a little too much. Yeah.
So you talked about enabling the poor. What kind of things do y'all have in mind to do that, such as maybe allowing the privatization of the transportation industry by reducing barriers to entry for private companies, creating legislation that makes it a little easier if you're not big
we're
oil?
still fighting Uber with the rest of the big cities, yeah. You know, it's interesting that some of these models that start for hipsters, like Uber and Zip cars, we're starting to ask, well, why can't we use those for the poor? If our poor are transit dependent, which we know they are, and some people, if their car breaks down, they lose their job, right? So why can't we do a Zip car that a Chodo is responsible for a fleet of 3 or 4 Zip cars, or the community center has Zip cars, and instead of a smart car or a what are the little ones that Pear drive? The Mini Coupes. You know, how about a van with some car seats in it? You know, why don't we do that for the poor? That's a very, very low-cost solution. In some areas in Dallas, if you're transit dependent and you have to get on a bus to go to a grocery store and get home with your kids, that's a 3-hour trip. Really? Really? And we can't put a couple of vans with car seats in them at the neighborhood centers? Why not? So we're starting to explore some of those things that might just help poor people too.
Could I make a comment on that? It is a low cost to get that implemented, and there are tons of private companies out there who want to do it. There's just a lot of barriers to get into the market that are created by big oil, super PACs from existing technologies. So how would you go about creating innovation when that's not fostered?
I don't know that we have any I mean, Zip cars came into Dallas like that. I don't know that there's any barriers to that. But that kind of cab regulation, I'm not very familiar with. Okay, good, thank you.
Next up, we have the wonderful Alamo City, San Antonio.
Thank you, Kelly. Good morning, everybody. Let me get this working right, and then we can start talking. Okay, San Antonio, where do we start? I've been impressed greatly by what I've heard so far this morning. The cities of Texas are really in the front line of a lot of different planning initiatives, and you've seen from my bio, I've been all over the country and taught in all these places, and everything I learned about Texas, I'm always sort of surprised and then amazed and really impressed, because the rest of the country, frankly, doesn't know that much about it. It's very bi-coastal, and finding out what's happening in Texas is a revelation, and it should be a real guide to a lot of places across the country. But I'm going to talk a little bit about San Antonio. We are doing things in San Antonio that needed to be done for a long time. San Antonio does not have a reputation for planning. I know, because I've been trying to find 2 assistant directors for the last 6 months and haven't found any yet. Nobody's applying from Texas or other places because I don't think there's a real culture of planning in South Texas. And maybe some of that's lapped over into Houston, but I hear there's good planning going on in Houston. So what are we trying to do to catch up in San Antonio? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about today. Our 2040 Initiative Comprehensive Plan, we've started out just this year. We're going to be updating some master plan policies, but really the last plan for San Antonio was adopted in 1978, over 35 years ago. And also the last time there was a real review of transportation policy was 1978. So the overall policies driving the city are pretty old, and so we really need to update that. I was wondering when I came to work in San Antonio about 3 years ago why that was. And a couple of facts sort of surprised to me that maybe there's some reason for it. One is that San Antonio hasn't increased its tax rate in 22 years. They've not had a tax rate, but provided billions of dollars of new development. Why is that? Just the growth. What's generating all that growth? Well, we had 31 million visitors last year. People love San Antonio. They like to live there, they like to come visit, they like to work there. That generates a lot of income, but doesn't generate plans. People, there's a momentum there of growth and development, and stepping back and figuring out, well, where are we going to go is just not something people do when they're all really tied up in this whole process of growth and development and building and just providing a good place to live for people. So I came on to take a look at what we have to do for planning in San Antonio, and here's a map. The map shows in yellow there the city limits, and that's in yellow. It's almost 500 square miles. In green there is the ETJ extraterritorial jurisdiction that we do planning for, which is another 600 square miles. So we're doing planning for about 1,100 square miles in and around San Antonio. And this is an area that is super rapidly growing. I mean, the city of San Antonio, about 90,000 growth, between the last two censuses, and going to about 30,000 a year right now. But when you look at everything on that map, that's grown by about 50,000 people a year. And there is no plan, and there is no zoning in all that green area. And right now, there's almost 500,000 people in that green area with no urban services. So that's a big challenge for those people and for San Antonio, where all that growth is impacting the city, and we have not really much control or no say at all in what happens there. So we're looking at 1.1 million additional people coming to Bexar County alone in the next 25 years, and 500,000 new jobs and housing units. And so what we've decided to do is to try to get a handle on all this growth is to first of all start out, well, where is their capacity for growth? How much demand is there going to be in pretty discrete units? How are we going to look at infill development, and what would be the cost of accommodating as much of that growth as possible in infill development in the city's existing footprint? And what's left over will have to go outside, they'll have to annex. And we had no answers to any of these questions. So we've hired a couple of good consulting firms, EPS out of Denver, Fregonese out of Portland, and we've got a couple of MIG out of Berkeley, mostly West Coast people, that come in and help us to answer some of these questions, to get a framework on how we should go, how we should grow in the future. Because we do have some overall vision for the city. The 2020 program that Mayor Julian Castro fostered a few years ago really defined the future of San Antonio, wanting to be a great world-class city, wanting to be a city exemplified with smart growth and really vibrant neighborhoods, and building on the environmental quality of the area and its very deep and old culture, and not lose any of that in the face of this rapid growth. And how do you do that? Well, it was pretty well defined on what wanted to be done, what the city wanted, but how to get there, what was the blueprint, there wasn't really a clue. So my job, give us the clue. What's the guideline? What's the roadmap? And so that's what the comprehensive plan is designed to do. We are embarking on a comprehensive plan that will provide the answers for that in terms of the capacity for growth and infill, the barriers to growth, the demand for growth in activity centers in the different parts of the city, how to align those things, and what the fiscal impact of those different kinds of growth would be, and where we have to put emphasis for infrastructure to make a lot of that growth go into the growth centers, both the existing ones and the new ones. So to do that, we started out with a comprehensive plan concept, pretty traditional, looking at housing elements and looking at transportation, public safety, et cetera. But then it morphed into, well, we really need to step back further. We really need to do a sustainability plan, which goes into air quality. It goes into a lot of other components that aren't usually covered by land use plans. And we really need to do a strategic multimodal transportation plan that begins to link up all these growth centers and looks at other modes of transportation. There is no good rapid transit system in San Antonio. It's the biggest bus system in the country, but that's not the big solution. One new BRT line just opened up, but there's no rail at all, period. All the roads are nearing capacity, and interchanges are being built at $500 million each, which is pretty ridiculous. So there must be a better alternative to all that. So we're looking at all that too, and then underlying all that is a big question mark about the basic resource that every city has to have. You know what that is? It's water. Will we have enough water in the face of climate change, in the face of drought, in the face of the aquifers in the south side of Texas, and the river is drying up and all that for the future. And if we don't, what are we going to do to get it? So we're looking at all those plans at once, which is, I think, probably more than most places have decided to take a bite of. A comprehensive plan, a multimodal transportation plan, a sustainability plan, a water plan, a housing element, and all of those being done in an 18-month period. So how are we going to do that? This is a big planning challenge for planners in the audience. Well, we hired these consultants. I told you about them working on our MIG group that are going to be doing the basic framework for the comprehensive plan, the policy review. We've got 500 policies. Of course, they're inconsistent with each other and out of date. Hard to follow those. Existing conditions, our policy papers on major areas like public health and safety, park recreation services and all that. A big, huge public engagement program. People in San Antonio don't even know the questions to ask. Must understand the answers when they answer questions about planning. So we are allocating nearly $500,000 for a big public engagement program to really get out there and explain, educate on every type of media possible. Urban design illustrations, 3D, 2D, whatever D we can to explain what it's all going to look like, how will new communities function, how do you integrate the entire population of Metro Austin into San Antonio? We're talking about what it look like, how will it function, how should it be, where will it go in businesses go in relation to everything else. So, initial 500,000 jobs. All of these questions require some kind of illustrative answer because people don't know. They can't conceive of it without some help. So that's a huge portion of this program too. And then writing all this up in a way that's understandable, without jargon, that's not written for planners, but written for people, that institutions, organizations, school districts, hospitals, PTAs, whomever, that need to use a plan to guide their future. So basically, we've started from scratch here. We didn't even have an organizational structure at all. There is no planning constituency in South Texas, organization of people. The MPO doesn't even have a planning committee. There is no APA. We have an APA chapter like this one, but, basically we can meet in a room about a third of the size and talk over lunch. That's about it. So there is no real constituency. The city council didn't have a committee on planning. There's no kind of organizational framing for any of this, so we have to create all that from scratch. So this is like going back to a small town and trying to create a planning program, not a city of almost 2 million people. But we have to do it. So we set up a tri-chair committee with city council people, CEOs of big corporations, big names at the university and environment. We're going to have a lot of different organizational structures, 13 committees so far. We're organizing to address all of these different subject matter areas in terms of growth and urban form, transportation, housing, green and healthy neighborhoods, public facilities and safety, historic preservation. The military, there's 200,000 military in San Antonio, big chunk of the population. Natural resources, the environment, jobs, economics, and changing the codes, and overall underlying sustainability. We're going to have working groups working in all these areas with subject matter experts taken from all the different companies, corporations, interest groups, nonprofits in the city. The mayor sent out a letter last week inviting 49 different institutions to join an advisory group and send people and send plans. What they're doing, what they want to do, and who they want to be engaged in this program so that we have some real technical depth as well as breadth in the community to engage this program. And they'll be populating these working groups, and then from those working groups, their chairs will be forming our steering committee, headed up by those tri-chairs, and then our consultants, together with the Citizen Planning Institute, we're going to be organizing with a curriculum to train people like Planning 101, Transportation 101, Public Finance 101, so that we can be able to engage the public as we move on with this. And all that you see in this program feeding up there to the new comprehensive planning committee of council, which they've taken on as a primary responsibility to be sure the public's engaged in all this, and finally getting back to city council for final approval. Planning commissioners are involved here. And so we've got a whole structure of people, organizations, institutions, and subject matter experts coming together to address these long-range planning issues in all these different categories. Never done before in San Antonio. So the biggest piece of all that, this is a $3 million, what I just explained to you cost about $1 million we've got budgeted. This is another $3 million to do the transportation component of this. And this is to look at a city that has a big bus system and lots of roads and nothing else, but like 100 trains a day that goes through that sort of disrupt everything. So how do you organize all that in the face of all this huge growth that's coming at us? So we know about Texas and the population growth there, and our Texas Triangle, San Antonio, Austin, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, we're all here. This is where the action is. This is the most prosperous part of the U.S. right now, probably the most prosperous part of the world, most rapidly growing, and we are here with the responsibility to make that growth happen in a way that's sustainable, good, always for all of our citizens, and a whole lot of new citizens that are going to be coming. So how are we going to deal with that in San Antonio? Well, we're looking at how do you accommodate these million new residents on all these jobs and housing units in a way that works. It's functional, it's walkable, it's livable, that responds to all those demographics we've been talking about, the millennials and the boomers. And in San Antonio, the underclass, we have over 250,000 people who don't have a high school education, and we are just, reeling from all the changes that are going on. How do we get them engaged in the whole community and its economy? So we are trying to put some rationality to this. We do at least have a 2040 metropolitan transportation plan that we've been involved in that's about ready to be adopted that looks at this, well, just for San Antonio, the million addition, but another 500,000 people for the suburban counties, adding this 1.5 million people to the 2.5 million people there now. So we're talking about planning for 4 million people in the greater San Antonio area. We are looking at a timeline here for the plan to get all done by spring 2016. So we have a pretty big roller coaster ride ahead of us. And we're all up in the upswing right now, but pretty quick it's going to go the down, the gravity, real fast. We're also working on the sustainability plan to look at our air and water quality and community health, resilience, and social equity issues. Not only is water a big issue in San Antonio, but air is too. We're the largest non-attainment city in the country, and we're just on the edge of tipping over into non-attainment, which has huge consequences for economic development, for local costs and transportation. We're trying to blow the air back from the shale, but Eagle Ford Shale, which keeps blowing up, and our sensors are getting those. So there's not a lot we can do, but we have to plan for that. Social equity and resiliency in large underclasses is a huge challenge for San Antonio, as it is for Dallas. It's growing. We probably recorded illegals in the city easily from Mexico, and how they integrate or don't with the economy is a big challenge. The sustainability plan will look at the community and municipal operations, not just, these air and water issues, but how we can operate the city more effectively. A big city like San Antonio has got almost a $3 billion budget. It's a major corporation, and it affects a lot of the local economy. Indicators we're going to be used to be based on the 2020 vision that we have, but we're going to try to really use some national standards and localize them to San Antonio. And then last but not least, and that's interesting, that's out of focus. Well, okay. We are looking at all that big 500, 600 square mile area outside the city limits to annex. Because, first of all, they need urban services. Secondly, all that population is impacting existing city services, streets and roads and parks, etc., libraries. We need to really look at areas that make sense for growth. We do not want to have those areas be competitive. Particularly, we do not want to become like Dallas, and not in a bad way. We just don't want to be surrounded by 130 other cities. And we could easily be surrounded by 130 other cities if we let all that land incorporate into 600 square miles of suburbs. So we have to do some preemptive, specific assessments there. And I'm sorry for the slides that when I copy it didn't look like this, but these are sort of out of focus, but at least you can see some things there. we did a big study. We called this a 360 annexation study. We adopted the council adopted a policy last year to look at annexation of all the ETJ, and we found 50 have a right plan for annexation with about 250,000 people in it. And we went back and we gave that presentation, and they said, well, prioritize. So we've come back now with some specific recommendations, and these are right now going to be before council on December 4th to annex about 65 square miles at limited purpose over the next 2 years. The current population of about 125,000. By 2020, when these become full purpose, it'd be about 200,000 people just in those increment in those 5 different areas. They are the northeast portion of the city here on I-10, going out toward Houston there. That purple place, that's partly, almost all developed now, but it's not in any urban services, and they have a lot of social problems there, crime problems, and it needs to be really managed because it's impacting the city around it. So that's sort of a preemptive approach there. On the north side, the blue area is north of the area called Stone Oak, real rapidly growing on Highway 281. That's going to be expanded to managed lanes and half a dozen new interchanges, about $400 million worth of investment over the next couple of years. No zoning there, so you can imagine what's going to happen without zoning unless we bring zoning in. And so we are going to bring zoning in there with the annexation. That pink area to the northwest is the I-10 corridor going out to the town of Bernie, and that area too is high income, rapid growth. And I-10 to manage lanes and maybe toll lanes and widenings with interchanges, and the land rush is on their way up there. The yellow spot on the west side is the fastest growing area of the metropolitan region, and that's called Animal Ranch. It's growing by about 5,000 people a year, I guess, and lots of new upper middle class subdivisions there. And then the orange area down by Lakeland Air Force Base, that's one of the major bases that are concerned about mission impact, new growth adjacent that could really compromise their mission. So they have different reasons altogether to annex these different areas, but together they provide a big program. We'll know by Christmas whether this will be a big project next year or not. And you can't read that. So moving on, this says we're going to get it done quickly. That was the annexation program to get all that back to council in most of those areas within a year. And then it takes 3 years for limited purpose annexation to become effective. We do a lot of detailed studies, a lot of notices, a lot of meetings, as you can imagine. And then around 2019, they'd be coming back for refined boundaries and full permanent annexation by the city. If that happens and all that's annexed, and we're looking at a 2020 city population of about 1.5 million from 1.3 million in the 2010 census. So it's all about outside. Here inside, we also have a program we started up to renew the city called USA. And trying to get our inner city neighborhoods up and going. The idea here is to reinvest in neighborhoods, to revitalize commercial corridors, to rehabilitate houses, to restore historic structures, to remove blighting structures, and regreen the city that's been passed over. So we're redoing everything, so hence the we're trying to do a kind of market assessment work here too, a little different from what Dallas is doing. We're looking more at the market value approach, where we've divided looking at the city in terms of its infrastructure, its street grid, its urban form, its market character, different kinds of product types for the different kinds of housing, retail, office markets, and trying to look at all the 900 block groups and divide the city up into different market segments from the developer perspective, not so much the consumer perspective. That's the difference between what we're doing. We're using the same consultant, though, if I can easy. So they're good, that's for sure. So we've done this kind of analysis. We've also got, that's going forward, and we're trying now look at that and come up with where we want to focus our redevelopment potential. What we have done currently that's sort of prospective. This is retrospectively. We did an analysis of those 3,900 block groups a couple years ago to find out what was the worst areas of the city that needed revitalization, both from economics, demographics, social equity, and physical issues. And that's all those areas shown here in the dark color. Those are all block groups in the center of the city. The loop there is the 410 loop, and so mostly focused on that east-west corridor coming out of the downtown. In red there, you might just notice some of those things are what we have taken from those is 5 targeted neighborhoods. We're working with HUD and with the local communities, chodos, and nonprofits to redevelop those 5 targeted neighborhoods as key priorities for all of our federal programs. We get about $20 million in federal CBG and home funds a year, and they're targeting about 80% of them in those areas to see if we can really make a difference in terms of the parks and infrastructure improvements, housing rehab, repair, single-family, multifamily in those targeted neighborhoods. We're going to be using that new demographic market value studies to refine this and expand these to other areas next year and the year after. So that, in summary, is a lot of things that we're doing. Just other things we didn't get a chance to put on here. We have recently gotten from HUD designation as a promise zone on that one area on the east side. We also have a choice neighborhood grant to revitalize an inner city neighborhood called Wheatley, tear down an old housing project, replace it with mixed use, mixed income development. And there's a promised neighborhood from the Department of Education to renew all the schools in that same neighborhood. This is a big White House initiative. They're really interested in the White House Policy Council here about how, if you throw all programs, as many as possible, into a small area as possible, what's going to happen. So our east side of San Antonio is that area, so it's very interesting. We have to report out on 200 indicators back to HUD on what's happening over the next couple of years. Our mayor became secretary of HUD partly because of this big engagement process that we have there, and our Housing Authority chair is now, I think, going to be Deputy Secretary of HUD for Housing for the whole U.S. So things happen in San Antonio and people notice, and we are becoming somewhat of a model in terms of that area to do with redevelopment. We hope we will be in the future for new development. I look at envy at all these mixed-use villages and multiple developments and walkable neighborhoods and transit lines and all the other cities, big cities of Texas. Hope we will get those to San Antonio soon, but we have a big job. Our council just sort of put back $80 million in money for a streetcar because there wasn't public support for it. They did not know why or where we needed to build a streetcar. Well, when we do our new downtown plan, the new comprehensive plan, multimodal plan, we'll tell them why and where and how it's going to be paid for. But nobody could answer those questions last year, but next year we hope to. So be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
John, I'm curious, as cities, as San Antonio and other cities do transportation planning, do you expect that TxDOT in the future will be providing the same level of support that they do now, or now that they're going to be getting more funding with this constitutional amendment, is there going to be more support from TxDOT for?
Well, we hope so. I think certainly there's a movement nationally, internationally, of course, for high-speed rail, for commuter rail, for local light rail, streetcars, and I think certainly the Texas transportation professionals see that. And as been said earlier today, some cities, we're here there too, have reached capacity on these roads. I mean, we can add a couple more $1 billion to roads in San Antonio, but we just costed out in the 2040 unconstrained MPO plan $20 billion just to get to the level of congestion management we were 10 years ago, given the growth. That's just like throwing money after, at nothing. So there has to be a shift to mode. What we have to do is explain that to the public, that you just can't keep building capacity which gets filled up. It's like, throwing water on the sand. It's just going to seep into everything. You have to change the mode. You have to change the way cities are structured, the way that they're organized. And then there could be a difference, and put houses close to jobs, jobs close to housing, change the densities, all those types of things which have been anathema sort of for planners for decades. We have to change that whole mindset and not just focus on cars to get everywhere. The more we can explain that to legislators, to the public, the sooner it's going to happen in terms of policy and funding at the state level.
I have a quick question. We heard today that the U.S. Army was going to be closing a brigade combat team in Fort Campbell because of some of the sequestration that was done last year. How are y'all planning for that in San Antonio because of your heavy reliance on the military?
Well, San Antonio has been the net receiver of almost all the BRAC Commission closures. The people that are closed out and moved end up in San Antonio. So we've been the real beneficiary from all that, a $2 billion major medical center in the last 5 years, you know, tens of thousands of new military transferred into the city, into the 5 bases. And right now, part of our plan here is a joint JLIS and a joint military plan with all of those military groups in San Antonio. So we did have a couple of base closures, and one was Brooks Base and one was what we now call Port San Antonio Kelly Air Force Base. Those are now turned into mixed-use new developments, industrial and mixed-use areas with their own tax increment financing districts and development potential. So that's how we've been looking at those as opportunities for redevelopment at a much better repurposed kind of structure than was there before.
John, we've gone from a very aggressive annexation policy in Fort Worth, not quite as aggressive as you're proposing, not nearly. And I'm just curious what the public response and the political response is in San Antonio to that level of annexation, both inside the city and in the areas that you're annexing.
Well, we've been all over 360 degrees on that. We did sort of a trial run last year. We annexed 19 square miles out of a 30 square mile proposal we made on the south side. But we only annexed 3,000 people. But we ended up feeling like we talked to 3,000 people. So everybody was concerned. But the businesses liked it. We annexed all the shale potential land and for businesses. And they liked the new urban service levels that was going to come to them, public safety, fire, police. So that part they liked. They weren't zoned already now, and so some of them really liked the fact that they were going to have some zoning protections, some public health, and code enforcement that had never been there in history. So all of those things are new service levels that the annexed areas get. Of course, the people that are paying a lot of money in expensive subdivisions for HOAs, or for PIDs and MUDs and those types of things, all those districts, they're not sure if it's good for them because the city property tax is basically adds up to about 25% increase in their overall tax payments. So they have to be convinced that they're going to get new services that will at least pay for, at least for a while, that increased annual cost to them. So it's a range of things. There's different reasons why people are being annexed or not. Others are concerned about environmental situations. We had a case recently with the Bracken Cave, maybe you heard about that, where the largest concentration of mammals in the world live in Bexar County. Bats. 100 million bats live in this cave, and the developer wanted to put 3,000 houses in jail. And the county, no zoning, sure, why not? Nothing could say no. Well, and the city helped foundations buy the property and preserve it, conserve it, but we're afraid about that happening. Our aquifer, we drink all the water from, it's getting completely covered with houses, and it's not under the city control. So there's some major environmental issues for annexing it all. And we don't want all those competing cities to pop up, woods and Woods and the Hilldales and every place that we can help it. We need all that to be in San Antonio. Good.
So next up, we've got Mr. Greg Guernsey from the City of Austin. He's the Director of Planning Development Review there. Thank you.
So it looks like it's good afternoon, and welcome to Houston. I used to live in Galveston. I'd come up and party in Houston, and I was talking to Kelly on the way over, and at the time my wife's grandmother lived in the Heights and moved in some housing, senior housing, and kept a note, and the house was probably only worth about $22,000, $23,000. And it was a nice little house, a little floodplain in the back, And I thought, well, that was really nice. And when she passed, I became the administrator, and I got the monthly check from the homeowner. So I mentioned I was coming down today and speaking in Houston. My wife goes, I wonder what that house, Grandma's house was like. And looked it up, and it was like close to $400,000 now. And so gentrification is certainly an issue that's not unique to Austin, because you keep hearing about Austin's prices. But it's certainly thriving alive within the Loop and the Heights area of Houston. So I just wanted to kind of bring that to light. So I'm Greg Guernsey. I've been with the City of Austin since 1985. So for most municipal employees and planning departments, I'm a relic, as you would say. Our department is made up of all the building functions, the functions that deal with zoning, subdivision, long-range planning. We have a separate transportation department that handles Uber, that can take up to 4 hours in Austin of discussion about whether the taxis are rights or not. So we don't deal with those particular type of issues. Austin itself is about 300 square miles and has an ETJ of about 310 square miles. So we're certainly about half the size of maybe San Antonio. I too hired 2 assistant directors. It took me about 9 months. Both were from Texas, though. And I think just to kind of round out some things, my demographer told me in April we were the fastest growing large metropolitan city in the United States. I think Teresa and David kind of bore some of that out, saying we grew 118,000 people between 2010 and 2012. There's about 110 people a day moving to the Austin metropolitan area. When I moved to Austin back in about '83 to go to grad school, we were probably just about 320,000. My demographer says we're about 880 right now. So that kind of gives you an idea. I must have made a boo-boo here. Hang on. Oh, maybe I should just use the mouse. Oh, now you're into me, yeah. Yeah, okay. I'll just right click. So, I want to talk about a couple things today, and in Austin, we adopted our comprehensive plan in 2012. Imagine Austin was actually, you could say, the third attempt to do our comprehensive plan. I don't think we stole the name from Houston, but that was certainly a grassroots effort that came up with Imagine Austin. Our plan envisioned a time frame about to 2039. One of the major programs that's underway right now in my city is Code Next, which is a rewrite of our code, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So let me talk a little about what I'm going to talk about today. I'll give you a little introduction, which I kind of already done. I'm going to talk about the implementation about Imagine Austin, because in Austin, process is as much as important as the product, and if you don't implement it, it's not worth a dang. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our implementation program, and then I'm going to talk about Code Next. Austin's a very engaging community. I've had staff come to me from West Coast, East Coast, all over the place, and they basically will come up to me and say, I never expected to meet citizens in an engaged way, and that's really true. I think Austin, unlike some cities in Texas, we go out of our way to say hello and bring you in. My notice requirements are 500 feet for both utility customers and property owners. Not to mention the 300 to 400 neighborhood organizations which we don't regulate how they come into our system. They just register the Public Information Office. So whether that's a site plan or a subdivision or a zoning change, and we actually notify more for those processes. So we try to invite you in. They're in Spanish, they're in English when we send out those notices. But we have an annual report for Imagine Austin. This is our second annual report that we'll be bringing out. It talks about our accomplishments that we have over the past year. And it's not just my department. It is very much a shared document among all the departments. We look forward to the year 2017 when we do our 5-year update. And these are in our city charter. They were established in the mid-'80s. And the past comprehensive plan that preceded Imagine Austin was grandfathered. Our first comprehensive plan was in 1928. I can't say 1925. Our first zoning ordinance was in April of 1931, along with our building code. We probably had 3 versions of the comprehensive plan. The last one that was adopted before Imagine Austin was the Austin Tomorrow comprehensive plan. That plan was more probably looking at growth centers that were kind of aligned along with IH 35. It did bring forth a lot of changes to the city as far as regulations, but it even mentioned neighborhood planning, which was probably a relatively new thing back in the 70s. But it wasn't one necessarily that you would think that you would find brought up to today. We had actually 2 other opportunities. One was Austin Plan in the late 80s. And you saw various curves of development. Well, back in the 80s, mid-80s, the economy started going really bad. In the late 80s, I would say the Texas economy was far worse than we've just experienced in 08, 09. The dot-com bust for Austin was just horrible in the early 2000s. At that time, all the S&Ls, savings and loans in Texas, were folding. My note got flipped, I think, 6 times in a period of probably less than 4 years. I was even picked up, I think, by the FDIC, I think was even one of the entities. So we established a vision through Imagine Austin. It looks at becoming a complete community. And in the center of this is a growth concept map, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And Austin, just so you know, is kind of a divided city. And what I mean by a divided city is that the east is grassland prairie, and to the west is hill country, not unlike San Antonio that has that same thing. We have an implementation program which is really important to this, and it is a hallmark of Imagine Austin. And we look at it looking at community engagement, internal alignment, regulations, capital investment, and partnerships, and I'll go through those in a little bit more detail. Community engagement, when we did Imagine Austin, we reached out to over 18,000 participants in that process. We're very proud about that. It was a very difficult thing to do. When we went out, particularly the Hispanic community, I think somebody had mentioned that was difficult in their city. We actually went to hang tags. We had things called meetings in a box that we would pass out that you just turn in. It's kind of shaped like a pizza box, but you could hold meetings for within your group, your church, your civic organization, or whatever. But even after the plan was adopted, we had meetups. We had one of our first ones is at South by Southwest. Let's talk about our comprehensive plan. Do you even know what your comprehensive plan is? You don't even know what it says. We have all these new people coming, so that was one way to engage them. We have a speaker series. We've had over 1,000 different people come in to go through our speaker series. We've invited people like Jeff Speck, talk about walkability, Mark Stern, talk about arts and cultural development within your community, and we've had many others, and we will continue to do that. We don't have a lot of money to do that, but we will continue to do that. We've also tried to do online outreach to folks and to bring them in. We've even taken our comprehensive plan and then taken to Book People. It's the second largest, I think, independent bookstore in the United States. I think they've actually sold more copies of our Imagine Austin comprehensive plan than we've actually been able to sell across our counters. There's internal alignment. I put a little green at the top because I was told that was kind of the theme of the Houston section. But it's really aligning a lot of our programs together. Before our last comprehensive plan, the Parks Department would do some development over here, the Public Works Department would do development over here, You would have water lines, sewer lines. Eastern Department was looking at their own little plans to try to engage and bring those to fruition. You know, we're trying right now to bring those all together and having that discussion. So in the comprehensive plan, there were 8 priority programs: Compact and Connected, Code Next, which I'll talk about in a little bit, sustainable water, green infrastructure, workforce development, a creative economy, healthy Austin, and household affordability. We put these into topic groups. The city managers basically dictated down to the departments saying how important it is. My department is not the lead on all of these. In fact, my department is only in the lead on Code Next, and other departments are responsible for those other pieces. So I work with them, they work with me. If we all don't work, then we get in trouble. So we have Compact and Connected. We also adopted a complete streets policy this summer. We're advancing on urban trails, master plan. We have a Velvet Crown trail system that we're putting in southwest Austin on the east side. We've put in along Walnut Creek trail systems that are going in. We've worked with Capital Metro on a complete rapid bus system and trying to work with them. Our rail package, which was a major package that came up at the beginning of November, failed by 58%. Most every other bond item on there passed. Back in the 90s, we also proposed light rail. That failed by 0.5%, so this one actually failed by a lot more. Most of the voters that were really engaged liked it if you lived downtown, maybe near the university, along the route, but if you were in the suburbs, everybody voted against it. But they raised bonds for the ACC, the community college, and also for the school district. Code Next, and I said more detail on this, but some of the accomplishments, we go out and we listen to the community, and there were numerous meetings, both in small settings, interviews. We've looked at the code diagnosis, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. We had a character manual where we went out and kind of showed pictures of people about the places, but like I said, I'll come back to that because that's what I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So these are all accomplishments that we're putting in this annual report, and we're giving this to councils, made open to the public. Austin's in a drought. We spent about an hour last night at council talking about a new golf course for a PGA golf course. Staff wasn't recommending that. Our water director had a very difficult time with that. We have actually won awards for water quality and actually reducing the amount of gallons of consumption per person. I think we've already passed our goal that was identified. We have a watershed protection department. Austin regulates a lot of the area, particularly over the recharge zone, through our watershed protection ordinance, and we had a major update to that ordinance in the past year. We also have bond packages that we float, and we acquired, I think, of over 1,700 acres this past year to put towards open space. It's interesting when you really talk to a lot of the businesses that come to Austin. Why do you want to come to Austin? Well, it's so green. You know, that Carlos had mentioned in his little speech earlier about, you have a great downtown, you have a great park system. I don't know about our transportation system, but we certainly got 2 out of the 3 right on that. Habitat conservation in Martin Springs. We do have salamanders, or little protected critters, and so we take pride in that. The Martin Springs pool is really our gem, our central park. If you ever come to Austin, you should go down there. Water's a little cold, 68 degrees, but you'll enjoy it. I talked a little bit about the water quality. I guess it was 1,800 acres. We just started an urban forestry plan. We've been already looking at public trees. We've now consolidated the forestry unit within my department, and now we're going to look at a private tree program across the city. Not that we're going to regulate anything, but to get a better idea of what our tree infrastructure is, both on private land, because we've already done that for public lands. We're looking for certainly partnering, and we do this all the time with the Nature Conservancy, Hill Country Conservancy, about buying lands, and we work with our water utility as well as trying to work with the management of those lands. We have a digital divide in Austin. We have a lot of residents that don't have access to internet. They don't have access to either the hardware or software that's out there. We are blessed to have Google name Austin as one of the cities, and it's kind of a give and take blessing. If you're trying to put an entire infrastructure in within less than 2 years, your permitting section gets kind of rattled. So if you are fortunate enough to have Google come to your town, AT&T will lower their rates. Comcast, Time Warner will probably lower their rates or increase your speed for free. I asked for $1 million this year, and I was fortunate to get it to help have additional inspection services to get all that infrastructure in for this year, and I'll probably be asking it for next year. If I can find a way to charge them, I will try to do that. We worked with the Parks Department and our schools to have additional youth centers put into the city to try to get that out there. And we've also put in, and our council is very, minutes already? Okay, that is really important to get businesses that come into Austin saying, you can come to Austin, but we want you to have a living wage. Some of the other accomplishments that we've done is launching cultural mapping projects, and we've actually enlisted the help of artists because our artist community, both music and visual arts, are very important, but they're getting priced out of Austin, and we're trying to work ways to keep them in. Housing affordability, we've actually have a density bonus program downtown and along a lot of the major thoroughfares where you get additional units if you provide some public benefits, community benefits, and a lot of those take in affordable housing. Capitol Studios is about 135 units. They're getting down to affordable units being 30, 40, 50% MFI into those units. That's our first affordable housing project in downtown Austin in probably about 45 years. But we're also looking at other housing across the city. City's also approved bond projects. When they failed the first time around, council's taken the step to actually put them back out there on a separate bond issued by themselves and actually get approved. So we're funding it across the city. Healthy Austin, we have a complete street policy. We've worked with the health department in working on actually updating our subdivision regulations about making complete streets and getting more walkable communities. My building has gone basically smoke-free along with many of the other city buildings in Austin. For smoke-free campuses, you can't smoke basically on city property. My employees can't smoke on city property. There are succession programs to get you off of that. We have Cycle 2. We put up 40 stations, I think, in about 6 months. Towards the end of last year, beginning of this year, I think there are like 50,000 checkouts so far on that. It's a very collaborative process. We do work with the school district. We work with the Parks Department. This is one example where we've been able to integrate water quality, traffic calming, stream restoration, and working with the community and trying to bring that all in place. Regulations, as I said, we updated the land development code, but we have Colony Park Master Plan, and we got a HUD grant for to try to make this a more walkable community. We integrate updating our zoning cases and looking at those things. A really exciting thing is our long-range CIP program. We have what's called a capital planning office, and they bird dog all the other departments and make sure that our bond money, CIP money, bond programs that go out are in coordination with our comprehensive plan or neighborhood plans, depending on what's happening in those particular areas. When we do small plan implementation, those departments look at our neighborhood plans as well, and we have about 59 of them that are proposed. We're probably about 4 away from completing that. Partnerships, we work with everybody that we can possibly work with. School districts, we have about 7 of them. We work with them on facilities, doing joint facilities, libraries, schools, or park facilities is being in those types of things. So I'll get to code next. I only got about, as I said, our comprehensive plan, it's 21st century plan. These were the 3 pillars in which council said are most important in the plan. That community engagement I've already talked about, that it is sustainable, that everything that we're looking at is looking at that long range about we'll be able to basically use our resources to the best of our ability, but the implementation part is a 3rd big piece, and that's what we're talking about when we go through. These are the visions for our complete community. Through that already. This is our growth map. If you take a look at that, these are the areas where our community has decided we want to grow along these major corridors. Our Code Next is having a discussion, almost taking about a year and a half, just about how we will go about to do this, but this is where a lot of the direction will lie on what we change. Code Next is that key piece. That's my piece that I'm responsible for, of leading all these departments in. I have about 4 staff that are assigned for this task. We enlisted Opticos development, or Opticos consultant to assist us with that. Our last code rewrite was done after our comprehensive plan. It's a major zoning rewrite. Took us 4 years. I wish you well, John, in trying to get your plans and everything adopted. Our comprehensive plan took about 3 years or so to get in. We've had about 181 amendments since 2005. If you think of a deck of cards, I have my ordinance, and then I start having watershed ordinances, sign different regulations, changes to different regulations for McMansion, commercial design standards, all that piles up. There are 60 districts. In 31, there were only 5 districts. So think about that. If you take all the different combinations of them, you get into the hundreds of districts, but I won't go there. It's not user-friendly. Our core to the revision team includes our city council, planning commission, a code advisory group, and I'll note that 4 of those representatives of the 11 were chosen by staff. The other 7 were chosen by our council, which is an at-large council. At the beginning of next year, we go to 10 districts. So while I'm doing all this, I'm going from an at-large council to districts. And I'll say having a comprehensive plan is very helpful because I think I'll be able to keep the context of the discussion of citywide in place. Our regulations that we're looking at are changing are those that you see. Environment takes in landscaping, tree preservation, water quality. Just note that. Opticos, again, is our lead consultant. We couldn't do this project without them. Our comprehensive plan is about $2 million. Opticos in the end will probably cost about $2 million if you're trying to get an idea. But there's a lot of this is on staff side. I stopped all my neighborhood planning process to work on the comprehensive plan, and I actually started dedicating people with my department to work just on the code amendment. I can't have people doing 2 things at once. It's just impossible. This is the chronology of events. We started in 2012, and it just keeps going and going. And hopefully by 2016, about the time I retire, we'll be done with this. My proud city manager, I would probably stay to the end of this process. By that time, I'll probably have over 30 years with the city. So the foundation of a code is built on a lot of these different things. And if you look at these documents, the book in the back that this kind of the maroon color is my Aggie friends would like to say, whoop. This document is when we combined all our codes in 1987 into a single code and to create a land development code. Just as we did Imagine Austin, and I'm almost done, we have community character in a box. We went out to about 105 or so neighborhoods and asked them what do their neighborhoods look like, what is the resident character. It's very important because a lot of people wanted to basically have some stability in their neighborhoods, and there's areas of change and there's areas that probably won't change, and so this will inform how we go forward with our code. Again, you can take a look at some of these things that are out there. That's kind of some of the proposal. What does success look like? Because success is not the same to everybody. So this is what we've determined, that if we have a process is open and is fair, is focusing, trying to get common ground, that we engage people in this process, we're on time and within budget, which we did with our comprehensive plan. I got a lot more traction with a code rewrite because I did the first thing. My comprehensive plan was on time, in budget, and I really did get out there and get engaged with all my friends. So anyway. If you want some more information, you can go on Austin Code Next. It's there. You can probably find a lot of information on Imagine Austin. I thank you for coming to this event. I greatly appreciate, I think this is a tremendous idea of having this event. It was probably a great idea for a state conference, too, but you went up the state, so my hat's off to you.
I've got a question for Austin. How did you manage to lower your per capita water consumption?
Well, I'll give you a little secret. We own a water utility. That helps a lot. We also own our electric utility, which helps a lot. We also own the airport. That helps a lot. We own and control the convention center. That helps a lot. So having those different things all help attract businesses to come in to Austin, and then when we give them rebates and we give them incentives for not using as much water, all that really gets there. I think the drought and having the drip police, I guess you could say, come out and actually publicizing the 10 biggest water users, all those things do help the utility. But we offer free toilets. Those that you don't have enough money, you can come in, free shower heads. Those things are things that can be done. And reclaim water. Purple pipe is your friend.
You mentioned briefly the transition from the at-large city council to the district.
I'm so excited about that.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what do you think the biggest challenges and opportunities are from that?
Well, it happens everywhere across the United States. I think Austin, Columbus, I know if they still have at-large. We were one of the last large cities in the United States to have an at-large system. And there are some reservations because I think they're going to lose that perspective. I'm glad I have the comprehensive plan, and I'm glad there's an annual update so they can actually see what happens on the rest of the city. I'm not as concerned based on the demographics of those who are most likely in the runoffs. We have 9 runoffs that are about to be finalized in the month of December. Interesting, I was talking to Kelly on the way over. We'll have at least 2 guys, and the rest will probably be all women. It will be the result. But there'll actually be a balance of minority groups, I think, on that. It'll probably be more alignment of political parties than we've seen before. But really, that our Austin process is mainly aligned with neighborhoods, environment, business, developer interests more than it is for Republicans, Democrats, or anyone else.
I was wondering, it seemed in the past the neighborhoods had often gone basically to council member because they all represented the entire city. Do you think the system of your neighborhood
that's been all turned upside down by this, and you probably won't see that. The solution is dilution too, because you have all these people coming into Austin with much different ideas than the usual suspects.
About 4 slides from the end of your presentation, there was an image of a neighborhood plan. Is that something that was generated by your department, or was that something that was generated by the neighborhood itself?
No, the second attempt to rewrite the city's comprehensive plan took place in the 90s, and there was a group of citizens that were selected that worked on the plan that didn't go through because it came out about 1987, 1988. It was at a horrible time because the economy is so bad, and it was an anti-growth plan, so that's why that didn't happen. In the 90s, we looked at again doing a new comprehensive plan, and the Austin economy was picking up, and our planning commissioners, there were people who worked in the previous plan, neighborhood people, and it was decided that we would do bite-sized pieces. We would do neighborhood plans, and there was about 57, 59 of them that were part of that, and we started going down that road, and that was actually successful. But then the context, because Austin was growing so much, we need to look at the broader picture. And so a discussion then started bubbling up about, let's talk about a comprehensive plan for the entire city. They inform each other. It's a very sensitive topic in Austin. I'm sure it is in many communities. One doesn't necessarily trump the other. They both inform each other, and they both move in lockstep. So when we adopted a comprehensive plan, we brought all those neighborhood plans in with the comprehensive plan and took that forward.
I imagine in the same way that there's a lot of opportunity to learn from each other through environments like this. Can you talk about the work that Austin did with sister cities and trips and learning from other places and how that influenced the work that you did?
We do have a lot of sister cities from the United States, and they do come in and they talk to us. Maybe not so much for Imagine Austin. I mean, we actually engage the county in our process. I guess you could say a committee of somewhere between 34 and 38 that we worked with. That the 11 I talked to about for the Code Next, that's a good number. Dealing with 34 to 38 people, I think at the end it was maybe 32, was very difficult, but we engaged folks from the county in that process, and they probably informed us more. We had representatives of the university, representatives of the school district. We had youth that were in high school that were all part of that working group, that CAG that worked on the plan. I won't say that certainly those other sister cities across the United States, we had actually speakers that came in because we would send delegations to their countries. They would send delegations here, and we would have a much different discussion. A lot of that was top-down that we found in most of the other sister cities that we dealt with. They didn't really have the opportunity that we have here in the United States to really dictate what happens in their communities. The nice thing about sister cities is, getting flights nonstop to London from Austin probably would never happen if we didn't have those dialogues and events like F1, which Austin really hates professional sports unless you count the University of Texas, which is our professional sport. So we've shunned AAA baseball, AA baseball. We just got rid of our minor league hockey team. They actually fled and went to a small town that surrounds Austin. But we do embrace weird things. We have a very nice performing arts center, things like that. But those types of things are things that people come in from other places and say, we like that. We like South by Southwest. The people downtown aren't so keen on it, and neighbors around it, they're a little incensed by it. But that brings in a heck of a lot of money that really those other people coming from the international community and adding F1 are coming and seeing Austin in a whole new light. Thank you.